Okay, so we have two topics for the agenda today. We have the suggestion by Dan for the document. Now, in NVIDIA at least, I haven't finished getting feedback from everyone just yet, but from the people that have finished reviewing it, I didn't get anything too problematic. The only two notes that I received, and I really need to follow up on them, was first on the lifecycle management part regarding the provisioning. So to make the SZTP optional, we talked about it in the past as well, that there should be other flows other than SZTP. And that on the PCI baseline to make the host boot option optional, but I really need to follow up on that to understand what he meant by that. But that's the only two comments I got so far.
Yeah, we talked about that when we reviewed it here in the forum. And I think that just the question is what is the if it's one of multiple options, what are the other options? We just have to flesh that out. And any issues with that?
Regarding the host boot, you mean?
Oh, sorry, regarding the SCTP. Sorry.
Oh, regarding the SZTP. So regarding the SZTP, yeah, we mentioned Redfish and all that. That can also be under runtime configuration, of course, but that's also used widely for provisioning solely. So I think we can add here Redfish, or a lot of customers want to do the provisioning from the host itself. So I think all options should be valid. We shouldn't limit that.
Yeah, so we just have to define them and put them in the doc. Yeah, no issues there.
Yeah. We need to get one of the maintainers to merge this one, so to merge the revert, so we can. So you can open another one, and we can comment. Taking too long to revert this PR. It was easier to just have a follow-up PR. But never mind. So
maybe
that's
just
on my.
Maybe just do that at this point.
I think I will. I think it's easier. I'm not defined as a maintainer, so I can't merge it.
You can't merge it. I reviewed it and accepted it, but merging is blocked because the linters and the DCO failed.
Okay. Great.
So,
Then that's an easy fix. It's fun that the linters failed on a file that is deleted.
on a deletion. Well, the problem is with the linter is that it doesn't just lint the change, it lints the whole thing. So if someone else introduced our CI is funny. And I can't believe the DCO failed because I don't know. I don't know what's going on. But I mean, we can revert it, or we can try a different model where we, if we have comments that we want to make, we can just add it to the document, or make our own PR with the comments that we have. The miscommunication that we had between Mark and I was, Mark, the maintainer, was like, "This looks good. Pass all the checks. Do you want me to check it in?" I'm like, "I don't know. Yes, sure." Not realizing that we're kind of using the PRs as a way to collect comments, but I'm fine with that model of iteration. It kind of puts a lot of it feels like it might slow things down if like every change has to, you know, be put into a comment and then changed by the proposer and then the maintainers who neither of whom are in this meeting have to go then realize that everything's all good and then check it in, right? So it makes things sort of
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
I think that for now we can follow up with the PR to just edit the file because it's there.
Okay.
In the future, we should try to be more careful about what we merge or not. And regarding the maintainers, yeah, I guess you're right about that as well. We should try at least to understand if we want maybe to propose more maintainers.
I think we
But-
need to at this point.
Mhm.
And based upon the last TSC discussion, it seems like really the consensus would be to have each working group has its own maintainers to help enable stuff to move forward.
Yeah. So for us, it's Boris, actually. Now I'm looking at it. So he's defined as a maintainer. I guess he couldn't prove it because it's his PR. Never mind. Anyway, I'm okay with adding, I'll add another PR to add my comments from NVIDIA, and the rest of the folks just feel free to pile onto my PR as comments, and I'll edit it.
Yeah, that'll work. Cool.
By the way, did any other vendor get a chance to review it internally? Okay, so well, please take it as an action item because we would give like a time limit for that. So let's say 2 weeks from when the PR is there, we'll merge it even if we didn't get the ARC from ARM or anyone else. And of course, you can always create another PR on top of that to edit the file.
I did merge in ARM's feedback from the last review when we did it in this forum. So they talked about system ready, and I lifted the same text from the other system ready document and dropped it right in. So I didn't get any feedback that was the right thing to do, but it seemed like it fit well.
Well, we are learning as we go along. Okay, so that's about that. I'll create the PR and follow up there. Regarding anything else on this doc before I continue to the Ansible part? Great. So regarding the Ansible part, there are two topics. There is the naming of it, which Dan raised last time. I'm sorry if we offended or I don't know, anything like that. As I saw it, Boris just wanted to have something out there to, so we can start working and not argue about the name, but he was very clear about the fact that it can always change. So don't worry about that then. We can change the name.
Yeah, no offense taken. Yeah. I just this isn't the job I wanted, but it's the one I have.
No problem at all.
Be the name person. So yeah, but yeah, I guess in GitHub it is pretty easy to change the repo and the naming inside, and if we could just arrive at a name that is, I suggested just OPI Prov Life, kind of like what Ansible, Ansible OPI Prov Life, or whatever combination of those things seems like and that too, it might be, and I certainly am a proponent of this. It might be that what we define for provisioning and lifecycle might work for something that's not a DPU or an IPU. Like it might work great for an appliance, or it might work great for a box that has a ton of GPUs in it. So I think picking a non-device name would have other benefits other than satisfying the
The
Intel market.
question is if we want to set to apply that we support that case. I mean, if someone want to take this Ansible collection and apply it to something that is not an XPU, I wouldn't want to to even imply that I support that. I mean, generally the Redfish method would stay the same, right? So it makes sense it will work. If you do get firmware, it would be the same if it's a Dell or if it's a DPU or IPU. I hope.
Yeah.
But,
So I mean, I don't think we have any stipulations about support yet. We don't even have a release, so I don't know if that matters yet. But yeah, I just just bringing up that I think being not bringing it up as a making it something about a particular type of device, I think is just more generic. Yeah, that's mostly my point there.
Okay. Anyone
And I'm
else?
also fine with XPU as well, if that is that works fine as well.
Okay. Anyone else have any thoughts about this idea? Okay, then I'll sync with Boris and see if he thinks Ansible XPU would be a good name. I do prefer to keep it to say the device there, just to make it clear that this Ansible collection is meant for XPUs and DPUs, XPUs, DPUs, IPUs, whatever. I would say DPU a lot. I'm sorry about that. It's hard to detach myself from that.
As you should. You should, right? Yeah. We just we don't want to we had this long discussion in the TSC to try to sort this out. And we said, just like written in the chat, is that we write DPU, IPU in the docs, and then if we need a shorter thing in code, we write XPU, and we got good agreement on that. And then that was the intention, to sort of not have to keep rehashing it, and then we can all use whatever name we want when we present and when we talk about our own stuff. So I think that's a good result. We just have to stick to it.
Okay. Sorry. Okay. So Boris already wrote the first role as an MR. So he wrote some template that we can work with. I took the week to try and identify Ansible collections that we have internally, and I found 5 different ones maintained by different teams within NVIDIA. So that's a bit funny. Only one of them is completely Redfish. The rest are a mix or just from the host. So I think it would be easy to start contributing, and also figured out some folks that would want to contribute from NVIDIA. So I assume that you'll start seeing contribution for us in the near future. We just need to make sure it's aligned with managers and so on. But yeah, it looks like it's feasible. I did wanted to raise this to other participants. Okay, Alok, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. See that you raised your hand.
That's right. Thanks, Donald. So more of a clarification comment. You mentioned one of the Ansible collection that you had shared in the past is using the Redfish as a baseline.
So no, the Ansible collection that that was sent here in the past by NVIDIA, and I can add it here to the chat as well. It is actually a rather old open source collection that we had, which we kind of stopped supporting like a long time ago. I think the last commit there is 2 years ago, something like that. and it's all from being done from the host, not from Redfish. So it's a very
Right.
different one.
Yeah,
I did
because
found
I take
Star
a
internal.
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, go ahead. I'm done.
No, I was like going through the collection which you had shared in the past, and as you said, like it's mostly written like from the host perspective, and so I was really interested in looking like if there is any certain Ansible collection which is written with the Redfish as a baseline, uh, just to get a reference. And I think if I heard it correctly, I mean, you mentioned something like you have one collection at least that has been written with the Redfish as a baseline.
Yes, so there is one. It is pretty minimal because it tries to. It was basically written to try and test the documentation that we have, and try to move it from docs to like an Ansible playbook, which kind of resulted in a couple of roles being written. But it's very specific for the initial provisioning flow that we have documented, so it's not that general. Now, one thing I learned from reviewing this Ansible collection is that the guy who implemented it took an approach that kind of surprised me. He wrote this Bluefield Redfish Python library, which is very small, like Python library, 200 lines of code, something like that, very simple. But he decided to write on its own instead of using the community Redfish, because when he looked into how the community Redfish is written, he understood that there is a lot of effort to make it very, very general, that a lot of the commands are preceded by a lot of gets. So like if you have a post, there would be like 2-3 gets before that, and he was worried about scaling. I wanted to get like your 2 cents about it, because I kind of liked using the community one. Oh,
So
Julia, I didn't see that you were raising your hand.
I can chime in on this because I was part of this original drama years ago. The Redfish library that was accepted by DMTF, or that was collaborated in that community, attempts to basically walk the API to model everything as a Python object that's pre-hydrated. And as you noted, that becomes a scaling issue because all of a sudden you're essentially executing some huge number of requests, and depending on the surface that's exposed, you could easily end up with dozens of requests taking many seconds to populate a response object. I think we actually ran it against an HPE server with an early Redfish implementation, and we were benchmarking it like 30 seconds to get a fully hydrated client object. So the Ironic community specifically said that's not feasible. And so we ended up writing our own library to very directly do the minimal needful and cache the client. It worked for us. Unfortunately, means it's a little more effort for us to go and add things to it, but we avoided that whole scalability issue by just doing that needful thing. So it's kind of a question that one needs to ask themselves: does it make sense for us to try and do something that can have that huge overhead to get 1 or 2 pieces of information that you need, or do you just do the needful to get to that point? And there's kind of a question where you have to actually sit down and go, which is the easiest, simplest, cleanest path to take?
So, well, that's great to hear that you actually have experience with that. At the end of the day, when you talk about DPUs, in the long vision of things, we envision having hosts that have multiple DPUs on it, not just a single one. So I assume if we are talking about managing data centers of hosts that has 10 DPUs per host in a data center of 1,000 DPUs, which host, which is not that much, you end up with 10,000 hosts to manage. So I think scale is important here.
Very much so, and most approaches fall down around 100 nodes when someone's just trying to not think about scale. At least that's been my experience for the past 10 years or so.
Okay, so when we look at, like, for example, what Boris pushed as the first Ansible role, I wish Boris was in this meeting today. We can see use the community Ansible. Now, we can say, let's start with it and improve on it later. Or maybe we can try and maybe even use, Julia, whatever you wrote for Ironic. I don't know what if it is feasible or not to use that library.
People are welcome to use it. We've had some people post things here and there. It's called Sushi.
Okay, can you paste the
Yeah,
link here in the chat later on? No pressure.
I'll paste it in. It's doesn't have everything under the sun, but it has the needful, and we've added stuff when we've had requests or it's made sense.
When it's doing Redfish, does it go through the BMC or can it just access the device directly?
So with Redfish, it always goes to the BMC. There is a host channel interface defined by the DMTF. No one tends to really use that. There are some fundamental challenges with the host channel interface, and basically it's a socket. It looks like a network interface to an OS, like a USB network interface, and you can DHCP on it, and you have IP access to the BMC.
I see. I think that these Ansible scripts, though, might work better if they just access the XPU directly.
I mean, that is totally fine, and I think you may not necessarily be running the playbook on the end host that has an operating system or not. It can run anywhere really and connect to the BMC the AMC of the XPU. The problem with connecting to a host BMC is then you're limited to what is exposed through that BMC. And so we know, like, some vendors that have some of that functionality, what you might see on the host is a very simplified subset that's partially hydrated through like PLDM calls, pulling the management controller remotely across the PCI bus, or actually SM bus most likely.
Yeah, and I think that the way I wrote the previous document we were talking about is that, we're trying to minimize the surface area on the BMC because there's just too much variation. Like for us to have a standard way to get to the DPU, IPU, and we always have to go through the BMC, which there's 1,000 implementations of, which is never going to work. So if we can just minimize what the BMC has to know about, and then have some Ansible scripts that can talk to the device directly over the network or over the management interface, then that's a much better chance of success than.
Absolutely. You also have the standardization of each vendor is in control of what their AMC's Redfish implementation does, whereas being at the mercy of your larger chassis VMC means that if you somehow find an issue, you're looking at 9 months to a year for a fix.
Yep.
And that's a whole other issue too. So I think that there are some practical issues here that you have to kind of think of as well.
So I guess I'll post that question to Boris, is just like how the what he started with. Does it talk directly to the device, or it has to go through the BMC? I think having everything go through.
What do you
the
mean by talk directly to the device?
talk directly to the card, whether that card has an AMC, like Julia was saying, or the card can respond to Redfish from the network side, like a
So
like
you
an
mean after the card is already up and the OS is up and everything is up, then running a Redfish server on the card?
Yeah.
And
That is not ideal, but it is a thing people do. The problem is most people, when they use Redfish, they're doing they start their interaction with, I want to change how this device boots and operates, and I wanted to start this process of rolling out this OS, which means that same Redfish service, if it's tied to a running OS on the card, it won't be there after they reboot. So it's a one-time operation at that point, which is
these are things that are, if we have a life cycle that is functioning, then these are things that we can fix, right? I mean, the SCTP is the, in that document, what I think we've agreed on so far as a way to get the card provisioned. And then once you're up, then you can have a runtime RPC call into that card to go and configure it. And it'd be great if we had some Ansible scripts that kind of help us standardize that. So that's the mental model that I have, is that we can definitely get there, and we have to avoid these pitfalls where we're like, oh, we're going to use Redfish, and that always uses a BMC, and now we're it's like the yak shaving at that point. So I want to avoid those types of things, but just with not having our assumptions all laid out before we jump into this.
that makes sense. I think that having Redfish as a standard at the end of the day kind of allows us to do both. But there would be things that would only be possible from BMC. If you want to push an OS and install it, I assume that you won't be implementing it on the Redfish server that runs on the XPU, right?
No, you use SCTP. That would be the mechanism to get yourself.
Yeah.
Like that.
So
Yeah.
so for those areas, I guess that the user will need to know what he's doing when he's using this Ansible collection. So just not use the update service and push an OS image if he knows that this card that he's using for is already up as a Redfish service on it, and all that. So
I think that the thing to delineate here is mechanisms for use. It might be that, well, I know for a fact, people don't use the update service to deploy operating systems on entire hosts. People use it to update firmware. And there's no guarantee that a vendor is going to expose a functional update service. And most update service support mechanisms are really just modeled around firmware. So I think there are practicality questions, and then how people actually approach these things when they when they're in an operational situation and they're focusing on, oh, I just have to get to this point to be able to move on to my next task.
Agreed.
Okay. So this is a question we need to post on Boris repo. Then maybe we can start with, before we post it on the repo, maybe we can start a thread on Slack to conclude on that and how this should be modeled, because we know that we want both, but we should make it very clear of how to use it for each case. We also want the ability to use Ansible not from Redfish, not by Redfish at all, and do it from the host, I guess, at some point. And that's maybe a different mode of operation.
Okay, one question to you, Julia, also. Julia, is from your, experience, what you've seen with different vendors, is the update firmware service somehow standard, or it's usually the OEM thing, OEM specific thing?
So what I've seen is it's standardized enough. However, like resource naming is going to be different. And there is to handle that further, there's this whole concept of software inventory, but I haven't seen a functional software inventory resource yet.
Okay.
That was one I would love to see some folks actually do and they have a working logic around it.
Okay, because usually it's when you're doing the updates of the software or the firmware, there is like, you can do it the bulk update of the whole thing, or you can do some individual parts. And I was wondering whether there is some division of the components that's been established in the industry, or it's very, yeah.
Yeah, the names are not standardized, really. In practicality, I think there is some standardization just from common term usage, but beyond like BIOS and BMC,
Okay.
I don't think there's much standardization. And from what I've seen, only 2 vendors really support like a bulk apply / update, and those are both, as far as I'm aware, OEM actions only.
Okay, thanks for that.
Yeah, usually the reason for the bulk action is they're not cross-vendor mechanisms that get leverage. Usually it's like uploading a zip file that has XML payloads that explain to the system how to go get the other pieces it needs, or which files inside the zip file it uses to apply which piece. At which point you're into vendor specific naming and architecture of the update function.
I was wondering how far we will be able to go with something standard in this firm, but we'll see.
So like if I'm putting my red Fedora on, I would say like ideally if we could just tell the machine to boot an ISO or boot an EFI artifact using HP boot, or say, here's your virtual media, have fun, boot, that's perfect for us. We can also happily do network booting, although that's not ideal for us, especially with the elevate security we want to see in these devices. So, like, if we can just say, go boot this artifact using it's an EFI or an ISO image, have fun, then the card should be able to boot, take that and run with it.
Yeah, I've seen this kind of model, so I think I know what you're talking about. So we'll see.
I am a fan of HTTP boot for what it's worth. Unfortunately, it is EFI only, and there are people out there that don't want to let go of BIOS booting for some reason. That's a whole other topic.
I think it's, it depends on the model that a customer chooses to go with. It's sometimes simply not an option for their use case, and that's the reason. Yeah. Yeah,
and I am glad that most vendors have quietly emulated BIOS booting in Eufy, but even then, it's still not always perfect.
Okay. Okay. Thanks a lot for these comments.
Okay, folks. Does anyone else add anything more to raise? Something we want to touch base on this meeting? Okay, I'll take that as a no. So I'll send out the meeting. I post the meeting summary on Slack soon. Please try to take a look at Boris' Ansible repository and his template for an Ansible role, and make sure that the template is agreed upon with you. Regarding the modes of operation, Dan, if you can start the thread via Slack, and we'll see where it goes from there. If we want to, how we want to document it and how we want to work with it on the Ansible collection. And please try to figure out if you have some capacity to contribute to this project. In NVIDIA, I know that we do have an interest, and we'll start contributing soon. So the more the merrier. Okay, folks, thank you for joining.
Thank you.